this coming Friday. Mm-hmm. Almost 2 full weeks. Now, between that, they will essentially have practices like they do in the summertime, just not padded.
Mario, obviously the Las Vegas Bowl last year didn't go the way you guys wanted it to. How important is it to have a better bowl experience this year, and what kind of a building block can that be for you guys going forward?
Bowl games are always important, right? It's the last game of the season, and I think obviously it's 2 different scenarios altogether. But whether it's first game or the last game, bowl game, conference game, out-of-conference game, they're all going to be treated with the utmost importance. That's the only way to approach it. It's the only way we have approached it, and that'll be the case this game.
You know much on Michigan State? I mean, is that a team that you would have caught at any point this year, or have you had any people send you text early on that know them, just an early scouting report?
Well, I mean, quite honestly, during this time of year, we're doing so much recruiting. I haven't watched a ton of tape on them, but being that they were one of the teams that were in the conversation of being a potential opponent, I have watched some film on them and had the opportunity to coach against them as an offensive line coach in the 2015 playoffs. And they are what we all know of Michigan State in their history, just a very physical and big football team, with some good explosive players. They've got to be top 2 or 3 against the run nationally. I know that, and from a scoring defensive perspective as well, I know that they're in the upper, 5 or 10 teams in the country. And anyways, what I saw on film is just that guys that control line of scrimmage, knock your back. They play a lot of quarters. They do a real good job of disguising their pressures and whatnot. So. I know it sounds like I watched more film than I really did, but a little bit I'm relying on some of the stuff from the memory banks of playing them before, and they are consistent with what they do. They're a very well coached football team. Always have been. Coach Antonio does a great job with them.
Since they did play Arizona State early in the season, when you were preparing for Arizona State, even did any of that game tape come up in the preparation for ASU? And how much will, since it's just rare for a non-conference game like that to have a common opponent, it was a September game, so how relevant is that in game prep? You have something to reference, but how relevant is it now that it's months later?
Well, what sticks out in your mind is, again, how physical the game was. In terms of schematically, the changes from then up until now, it's hard to say that everything would be identical to what they were doing early in the season, but the part that stands out is that the score of the game is a pretty good indication of what that was. It was a very, hard-nosed, tough football game that, both defenses played really, really well. And they handled the noise and the environment extremely well. And I know that Arizona State came back towards the end of the game and got it done. So, but I'll know more. When, as we get on the plane, that big old bag that I have out there is loaded up with film. So between watching recruiting film and watching opponent film and breaking them down and start game planning for them, we'll have a pretty good idea by the time we get back together and talk.
2 more questions right here on the right, Austin.
Mario, I think you indicated that Justin wouldn't make a decision about his future until after the bowl game. Mm-hmm. Do you anticipate that that'll be the case for any underclassmen that are thinking about going pro? And will you have some conversations with those players before the bowl game just to kind of prepare them for that?
Yeah, what we did right away after the last game of the season is send all their stuff to the NFL Advisory Committee so that we can have the most factual data that we could have to be able to sit down with not only them but with their families and do our best to, again, present information that's valuable and relevant to making a great business and personal decision, and then do our best to advise them in terms of our thoughts on how it would best play out for them. So as soon as we get that process will start rolling. We did meet about it since the early part of the season that we would hold true to that process, and I expect our players to hold to that process as well. I think it's an important part of just establishing a culture. Is it perfect? No, but we're heading that direction, and I expect it to be that way. And I think I think it gives them the best chance to make a decision as well. I think this is a noisy time of year for those guys, right? Everybody's in their ear and trying to talk up draft status, and it's a lot of sometimes it's just a lot of noise that could really confuse a guy when their focus should be on kicking, doing well on final exams. And recovering, right? It's been a good long season, a physical season, recovering and preparing to play their best football in order to make a great decision.
All right, last one, James, right here in the middle.
Just to follow that also, Marriott, because I believe the rule was that you limited it 5 underclassmen that you get to request. I don't think you could put in like 30 names or something. So
We limited
presumably
to,
that
I
would-
believe, 6 now. I think it was 5, then they moved to 6. I could be wrong on that.
So do you recall who the 6 were?
Oh, man.
I just didn't want to make any assumptions of Justin, Dylan, Troy. I mean, these are presumptive, but
Yeah, those are some of the names that are in there. You know, some of the linemen as well, because those guys certainly graded out really well. Because you want to, again, give them the best information you possibly can, and it's the best way to keep it real, also. But in terms of who else was in that pool, is that what you're asking? Gosh, you mentioned it was Justin, it was Dylan, it was Troy. The juniors that really stood out in conference play in our regular season this year, you could assume it was those guys. The guys that, the NFL showed that, you know what, these guys probably need to get a reading to make a decision.
Thank you, Coach.
Okay, guys, thank you very much.